Hi, welcome to the lecture on Chapter 5, Intrusion Detection Systems. So what we're going to do in this chapter is we're going to explain how intrusion detection systems work, implement some strategies how to prevent intrusions, identify some of the more popular systems out there, and then look at a term called honeypot, and then at least talk about one honeypot implementation. Of course, you're going, honeypot, what's that? We'll get there. So intrusion detections enable administrators to detect possible attacks prior to, just make sure you're monitoring enough of the data flow through your network to be able to detect when an attack is happening. We'll look at different solutions, and like I said, we'll talk about the honeypot. So what we're trying to do is try to do some preemptive blocking of, try to analyze the data coming in and try to stop attackers prior to being attacked. Sometimes it's called banishment vigilance. Otherwise, I'm being very vigilant as far as who I allow in and who I don't allow in. Maybe it could be attempts to detect, people getting in, looking at the type of traffic, and maybe they're leaving a footprint or a pattern of data that looks suspicious or out of the norm for what the business is. Now, granted, sometimes this can be, we may flag something as an intruder that isn't, and it may block legitimate traffic, but it sometimes can be a viable option. Now, normally what we like to do is do what we call anomaly detection. Anomaly it's an activity that doesn't match normal use, that we've kind of been monitoring data. We baseline the type of data the company does, and it has a certain look to it. And we've logged the data, the type of look, the type of websites, the type of traffic, what kind of data flow goes through, the type of data, what kind of packets we're sending. Baseline that to know what our normal activity is, and then set profiles up based on that activity, whether it's on a per user, per job title, per part of the company, per project. You can set up different types of thresholds to make sure that you profile so that you can match different activities. Now, some of the components to this is threshold monitoring, resource profiling, user group work profiling, and then executable profiling. We'll go into some of those. So, threshold monitoring, it defines what acceptable behaviors are. Now, it presets acceptable behavior levels. And now, when we say behaviors, it's what activities, what are you doing on the internet? What are you doing on the network that is acceptable? And then we'll set some preset values as to, before I turn to flag any activities that may be beyond this acceptable behavior. And then I monitor for any activity that exceeds those levels. Now, sometimes it's difficult to set those behaviors because as your administrator, you're making some best guesses. You've monitored the system, or you've studied what normal programming departments do, what normal schools do, before you're setting up these thresholds. And granted, you can tweak these as time goes on, but just know that it's susceptible to false positives. So you may be stopping things that you shouldn't be stopping. Now, there are a couple of different types of anomaly. The other one is resource profiling. And this measures system-wide resource use to develop that profile. And then basically, it says anything that I'm using different resources all of a sudden, or too many resources, I can go through. User work group profiling. This probably says, okay, the accounting department has this type of activities where the testing department has another set of activities, and they'll have different profiles because of the way they use the system, resources. So, and then when activities are outside of those, then you probably set up, you make them a little less acceptable and say, hey, I want to flag that. Now, changes in work pattern. So as job changes, as projects change, maybe this work profile, this pattern of a group changes, and it's keep making sure you update that profile can be a little bit difficult to maintain. And if you had a dynamic user group, you may be hard to maintain that kind of profile. Now, executable profiling, it pretty much measures and monitors how programs are using system resources. Now, granted, it helps detect malware. It may track system services that, maybe not traced to a particular user, but at least says, I know that I'm using resources I hadn't used before, executables I hadn't used before. See how objects like printers and print servers and file servers are used. And it does enable the IDS to identify activity that might indicate an attack. Now, there are at least 10 different components to an IDS. Activity administer sensors, analyzers, alerts. All of these are defined and in the textbook. I'll let you try to read that. It's actually pretty good. But now, the question is, there's a couple of different systems out there. One is intrusion detection systems and intrusion prevention systems. Now, intrusion detection systems, they're passive. They sit there, log activity, and when something flags, they alert an administrator. It doesn't stop anything, doesn't prevent anything. It just notifies a human saying, hey, something's going on that's violating one of the rules you set up. Are you going to do something about it? Now, intrusion prevention systems, they're considered active. They'll actually take steps to prevent an attack, but the risk you run there is you may get some false positives. They may stop activity that are actually valid, only because of the way you've tried to set up your rules that may cause some things to get flagged that you didn't expect, or you didn't know about that a project was going to go to a different website. Now, one of the most known open source IDSs is Snort. Actually, you're going to do your homework is installing Snort and running a couple of different scenarios with it. But it's available in pretty much every operating system. It's got 3 modes of operation: sniffer, packet logger, and network intrusion detection. So it's kind of a cool little tool. So you're going to download it. You can look at in that download, there's a user guide to how to use this. If you have questions with it, let me know. And if I need to post a small little video on it, I can. Actually, I may check the internet to see if there's a couple of videos out there. I'm sure somebody's done this already. And I'll post that if I find it. Now, there's 3 different modes. Like I said, the sniffer mode just monitors income traffic going to the computer. It's just an excellent way to check for encryption. And it does determine potential sources of problems. In the packet logger mode, it's similar to sniffer, but now the contact packets are written to a text file, and that way you can, search for certain patterns. One thing, if I'm just watching data go across a screen, it's easy to miss things. Logging it and then going back and analyzing, running scripts against it, searching for certain things, may make things a little bit easier on the administrator. And then in the network detention mode, it kind of uses a heuristic approach. You set up a bunch of rules. Now, granted, it's a command line base, so based on which operating system you load it on, most of you are probably going to load it on Windows. You're going to do it on command prompt, and then you'll have to look at the user manual to know the commands and what they do and what they don't do, The same thing you do when how do I execute the ipconfig command? What are all its options? So you need the user manual or the man page to determine some of the options there. So I'll let you play with some of that in the homework assignment. Now, Cisco has physical products that offers intrusion detection and prevention. Some of the older models are the IDS 4200 series or the Catalyst 6500 series. Currently, you say Cisco Next Generation IPS solution. There are definitely a number of different products I've got out there, from the 4100 series for small networks to 9000 for large networks. So, I mean, Cisco's got some interesting products, and one thing good about them, they've got their classes and certifications to help administrators be experts in their product. Now, the second part of this chapter is on honeypot. Now, honeypot is, you think about a honey, you'll put it, granted, most of us have a little plastic jar that looks like a bear or something that we pop the top and the honey's in the pot or in that little container. Well, it used to be that honey was stored in a pot. So a small little porcelain dish that the honey was in, and you'd take out a spoonful or use the fancy honey dips to get things out. But a honeypot is basically a single machine set up to appear to be an important server. And all traffic to this machine is suspicious. So it's sitting there, and anybody's trying to attack that machine, you got to be suspicious, because there are no legitimate users, no legitimate applications running on it, but you've just made it appealing to attackers that they want to go after it. And what's good about them, you can use the honeypot to help track and catch the hackers. Now, they may be configured at, for different types of server services, from email servers to FTP servers to just about anything. Now, one of the honeypot solutions out there is Spectre. It basically runs in pretty much all the operating systems, and it works by running a number of different services. And as you can see, you got email servers, Telnet, FTP, HTTP, a lot of different protocols that are being run. That makes it interesting, that makes the attacker think that it's a viable, valid server that is attacking. So it's running a lot of different services there. Now, Spectre can be set up in a couple of different modes. One, it can be set up in 5 different modes: open, secure, failing, strange, and aggressive. Fake password files can also be configured to a couple of different levels. So people think, I'm getting the password files. There's different ways that entice attackers to come in, whether it's setting up how am I going to modify traffic or password files. So this chapter is basically just a brief introduction to intrusion detection systems. They definitely should not just be used by themselves. You need to use them in perimeter firewalls. They can be run either at the perimeter or internally. Ideally, you want to make sure they're implemented at every server. There's definitely free IDS solutions out there, but you can also pay some money. And then, like I said, the honeypots just entice hackers into doing something that maybe you don't want them to do. But at least it gives them a chance. So hopefully this chapter gives you a little bit of an appreciation what intrusion detection systems are. If you have any questions, let me know. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.